I want to talk about a topic that is absolutely taboo, but it shouldn't be taboo because the Creator cared enough to tell us what the rules are, so we should know what the rules are. And it comes to multiple wives. And the problem is that most of the people who say something about multiple wives are probably people who shouldn't have any wives. I mean, they're just, I want women because I want women. And they see that in the Torah, and they don't go any further to learn what the actual rules are. And there are rules for this. And so, before we even go any further, I can't have multiple wives. At least not with my fiancée, because it's part of my contract with her that I can't do that. Unless it's required. And that's a real weird one, because there are times when it can be required. Excuse me, it's unlikely that will be a factor in my life, but there are times you can be required to have multiple wives. So with that being said, let's kind of walk through what the actual rules are. Because what good is something if you just say, oh, it's possible without knowing what the rules are? Let's try to define where those rules are. And the first place we really look, let's do Genesis 2:24, because that's the what I'll call the single person's claim, or single wife's claim. You leave your father and your mother and united to his wife, and they become one flesh. And people scream, well, there's only one Eve. And you're exactly right. There's only one Eve. Now, that being said, there are differences here. Specifically, Abraham was with Hagar. And that was requested by Sarah. Okay? And we get that in Genesis 16:1. And she said, Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. So he had Ishmael. Okay? Now we know the issue on multiple wives is in fact part of it, because we have a restriction if somebody is a king. And that's in Deuteronomy 17:17. He must not take too many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. There are other things he can't have either, in large quantities. And I don't want to go through Solomon here, because obviously he had a lot of wives, way too many. And we'll see as we kind of work through the rules here, some issues there. But the ones that we really see for multiple wives is with Jacob, with Leah and Rachel. Now, that being said, before we go into that, let's pull up the only rule that I can find that's clearly spelled out, and that's in Exodus 21:10. If you marry another woman, you must not diminish the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. Marital rights, the word is ona, and this is the only time it's used in Torah, or in the whole Bible. Diminish is the word gera, and your Bible may try to translate it something different, but it's to diminish or reduce. So, the marital rights, what are those? Because you cannot reduce those or diminish those. And without being too vulgar, obviously the times that you are intimate with your wife, she may want it once a week, she may want it twice a week. Okay? She may want it 3 times, you may want it 4 times, or 5 times, or 6. Whatever that thing is. The question is, if there's a disparity between those, you have the potential to have a second wife. But if she is equal to you, or maybe beyond you, then you have to actually do it even when you're not that happy about it. If you have to do it that way, again, if she's equal to you, then you're not even looking at a second wife unless you come to an issue where it's required. And there is a time when it is required. And I'll just go ahead and throw that out now. If you live in the home with your brother, and he is married, and he dies without a child, then you will inherit basically his wife to give her a child with his name. So that's a requirement at that point in time. But coming back to Exodus 21:10, we have some really interesting things, because let's assume for a moment that your wife is one time a week. And again, I'm sorry being vulgar, but I'm just, to understand it, you have to throw it out. And if she says, I don't want you to have a secondary wife, there's two ways of doing it. Either one part, put it in part of the contract to say you can't have another wife, or two, to say, okay, you like it 3 times a week, I'm going to go to 3 times a week. Because if you're doing that, then you have satisfied what he's wanting, and he's not going to be looking for another wife. Now, what we really do is when we go through here, we're going to really find most of the information in Genesis 30. And in Genesis 30, it's one of the issues, it starts out with the aspect of children. Rachel's jealous, saying, give me children, and Jacob's basically saying, it's not my fault. And she says, fine, here's Bilhah, my servant, sleep with her so that I can bear children for me through her. And he does, and they have Naphtali and Dan. And interestingly enough, Rachel is the one who names the children, not the servant. Rachel does. Recognize the same thing is true here with Jacob as it is with Abraham. He slept with the servant of the wife. You know, so in other words, the wife is able to offer up a servant in her place should she desire it. But that, from both Sarah with Abraham and Rachel, and we'll also see it with Leah, those all came from the wives. That wasn't Jacob saying, this is what I want. It was the wife who said, I want you to do this. Huge difference here. Huge difference. It's the wife who says that. And so, of course, when Leah said you saw she stopped having children, she gave Zilpah. And so that is from the tribe of Gad and Asher. And again, Leah named Gad and Asher. So as we look at this, we can see where this kind of breaks down, and so you can understand the Exodus 20 verse. Because during the wheat harvest, that's in verse 14, Reuben was out and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother. And Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take away my son's mandrakes too? I hope you realize there are a couple things here. One, Leah is not happy with the fact she is one of 2 wives. In fact, if you look at the names of the children she had, she was downright ticked off about it. She was upset, and she lived upset the rest of her life. So if you are if you're the guy thinking, oh, I'm going to have multiple wives, do you think that these wives are going to be happy? Because Leah was, I mean, if you're going to name your child after this is how he treats me, I mean, again, you don't have a happy household. Now, again, Jacob did this because he was tricked, but we still need to look through it and see how this thing works out. And so the issue with Rachel and Leah during the situation with the mandrakes is she bought Jacob for that night. So what do we have here? I think we can actually see this playing out, okay, for Exodus 21:10. Because Leah, being the first wife, you know, she had the times that she wanted conjugal rights. Whether that was 2-3 days, whatever of the week, and the other times were filled by Rachel. And they had a schedule going. And this night with the mandrakes was not Leah's night. But she bought the night from Rachel with their son's mandrakes. And so, you know, they had worked out a schedule of how this thing works itself out so that neither of them would be denied. Well, again, Rachel being the second one, she kind of picks up whatever the first wife doesn't. But Leah would have, you know, a set time to say, these are my marital rights, conjugal rights, and they can't be diminished. So it's an interesting thing because, again, most people just kind of look at it and say, oh, wow, I get to have a multiple wife. I can just go around and play around and have fun. First of all, I think your household would be utter mess. And you're going to be doing things here where you're setting a schedule and making sure that each of them are happy. And that's going to be difficult. And I'm probably going to leave it right around at that point in time, because I think we've kind of played out. There's just not that much more information on this. And again, even though I did this, it doesn't apply to me, so don't just start screaming, well, this guy's a pervert. I can't do these things. The only way I can do it is if I have a brother, which I don't have a brother now unless the Creator gives me a brother, and he were to die without a child, then and they were living under my roof, then I'd be required under Torah to marry his wife, to give her a child, not in my name, but in her husband's or first husband's name, which would be, again, my brother's name. So that's the only way it's going to happen, at least unless my wife dies before I do. And even then, I doubt anything's going to be going to this point in my life. But something to think about. Again, it may not ever apply to you, but it isn't so much better to know what the rules are.